Welcome to this session on Trends 2021 and beyond. My name is Matthias Posch. I'm the president of International Conference Services, a PCO that is active in 8 different cities across the whole globe, and I'm based in Singapore. I'm also the chair of the IAPCO Training Academy and the immediate past president of IAPCO. When we talk about trends for the future, COVID-19 is, of course, the number one topic, and that is for many reasons. One of the main reasons that we see is conferences have been kind of labeled as possible super spreader events. And we've seen conferences being one of the first things that governments shut down and still keep shut as mass events that are not necessarily on top of government's lists to reopen and restart again. We also saw that even though we tried really hard, some of the conferences that we have been running or that people have been running and tried to run in a safe environment, like Peter Diamandis, who tried to run a conference or earlier this year before the vaccines were rolled out widely with rigorous testing in place, still saw lots of infections and still came out to be a super spread event. And when we see headlines like this, of course, this is very bad for us as an industry. Another reason, of course, why COVID keeps affecting us is that international travel remains highly restricted. And here in Asia, we see hardly any borders being open yet, and it's very hard to foresee when those borders will actually open. We also see that vaccine rollout in many countries is still slow, and in some areas still has an unknown impact. We don't know exactly yet how many breakthrough infections there will be, what the impact on the hospital system is of these. So that's still something to be seen. We still see rolling lockdowns around the globe. As we see more infections and hospitals being overwhelmed, there's always this fear that governments will shut the economy down again, and therefore our events that are planned for the future might be impacted. And of course, we see still new variants emerging and even maybe new viruses in the future. So that is something that we really need to keep an eye out. And hopefully we are better prepared when the next virus hits, and we do better preparation for our governments to know how to deal with it, so that it won't have such a long impact as COVID had for us. So based on that, the future is in light of a post-COVID world or a endemic world where we live with an endemic virus. So the 10 developments and trends that we can see today are really coming out of this 2 years that we've now experienced. And number one trend, not very surprising, is hygiene and safety. And these are some pictures from Travel Revived. It was an event about a year ago now. It was held in Singapore, trying to showcase how a safe event could look. And some of the things you see here is on the very left, a registration confirmation that really shows that we are putting people into cohorts, that people get specific registration times when they can come up. There's a certain cohort that they use for all their meal services and so on. We also see safe management measures and hygiene practices, from wearing a mask, keeping a distance, to making sure no hands are being shaken and so on. And of course, the testing on site, pre-event testing with antigen rapid tests that really causes a lot of additional efforts in terms of logistics, cost, and space as well. The question is really to see if in the future, with vaccine passports or vaccination certificates, we can actually forego the testing, especially for vaccinated visitors, or if vaccinations might become mandatory for visitors to our conferences, especially when we deal with areas of vulnerable people in the medical field, for example, where we see people that are highly vulnerable and should be protected from the virus. Another trend that really will keep going forward and that we've actually experienced, especially last year, is an immense tech acceleration. And I put some statistics together for you here from McKinsey and Company to show how quickly technology has accelerated in the last year. So here is the first statistic on the average share of customer interactions that are digital in percentage. And you see that from 2017 to 18, that was basically flat with a slight bump from 18 to 19, and then a major bump from December 2019 to July 2020. And that's really across the board. It's globally, it's also in Asia Pacific and every part of the world. Not very surprising for all of us that have been through this. The same picture is really when we look at the average share of products or services that are partially or fully digitized. Here also we see a big jump from December 2019 to 2020. So we really got more used to digitized services. And very interesting is also how resilient we are and how much quicker we are in adapting than we think we are. So when we look at some of these organizational or industry-wide changes that came to us in 2020, there was an expectation how long it would take for us if we had to implement this pre-pandemic, and how long it took us actually once we had to, once the borders were shut down and government shut down the economies. So the increase in remote working and collaboration, it took about 10.5 days to do this. It was expected to take about 454 days. So the acceleration factor was 43. We were 43 times quicker than we thought we would be. Similar with increasing customer demand for online purchasing and services. The thought to get customers to that point was 585 days. That's how long it would take us, almost 2 years. It took us 21.9 days. The increased use of advanced technologies in operations, similar, an acceleration factor of 25, so only 26.5 days, and so on. So we really showed that we can do this quickly, and we should take this wind that we have now in our backs and move forward with that. If we look at the largest shifts during a crisis that are the most likely to stick through the recovery, that we think will stick in the long run, it's pretty much everything we believe will stick. From changing customer needs or expectations to increase in remote working, we see companies give up their office space and move more to a work from home model, and so on. So along those lines, all the way to increasing use of advanced technologies in business decision making, qualification of additional suppliers to build redundancy in supply chain, all of those things will stick according to this survey. So that really means we have to adapt. Our world will not go back to how it was pre-pandemic. It will be a new world that coming out of this, that will be a much more technologically savvy world that has clients that have needs that are being met in a digital form, that has employees that will demand or ask to work from home and use this newfound flexibility also on the long run. I'm going to jump over to the next trend, which is along technology standards. And we really see that standard has elevated. And when we look at the technology needs in the future, it's really way beyond AV. What we need now is a great integrated system that includes audio-visual, it includes broadcast, and it includes digital platforms that we can really use to include people that also want to attend our conferences in a virtual format. So the traditional AV company really has to kind of adjust its business model. So virtual and especially hybrid is the new normal out of that. So we see here also from Travel Revive, the podium discussion that was held with people being virtually as well here. Senthil from ICA, who called in virtually, some people on stage. Convention centers that build full virtual studios that stay there. So it doesn't have to be built every single time. This is at Marina Bay Sands, for example. And sophisticated platforms that allow also the attendee that can only attend virtually to get a similar experience as the one who attends live. And we will see some people being still not able to travel probably for a couple of years. We looked at that as one of the impacts. The travel is impacted. It's very unlikely that the world will be as open in the next 2 to 3 years as it was pre-pandemic. So while we might have open travel and open borders between certain countries, there will be some countries that will not be able to travel as freely, and therefore, especially in the international meetings world, we need to still offer an attractive virtual alternative to our clients. And that has also been really reflected by the ICA statistics. ICA has done a wonderful job in collating the data for 2020 and giving us some overview of what actually happened to conferences in 2020. And here you see the overall statistics of 8,409 events. We saw 44% in 2020 being postponed, 2% being hybrid, 14% only being canceled, 1% being relocated, 30% being held virtually, and 9% being unaffected. And if we look at breakdown by month, of course, January and February, the highest amount of unaffected conferences. And the later we go into the year, we see more and more virtual conferences. So we see really the trend was at the beginning of the year, when the pandemic just hit, we thought, okay, this could be let's just postpone, let's just move forward, let's do it next year, let's maybe even cancel. But the later year got, the more associations actually started to hold meetings and say, okay, we just have to hold them in a different format, so more virtual and more hybrid. We also see that in terms of size of meetings, the bigger the meeting was, the more likely it was to be held virtually. I think that also has to do with associations that hold fairly big meetings usually really rely on that income from those conferences and had to move these meetings virtual in order to keep the finances of the association at a level that was needed to run the association. So then we also look which fields have actually decided to move virtual versus postpone versus cancel. And we see that, of course, the technology sector was the most open to run meetings virtually, probably from the beginning, also has the highest percentage of hybrid meetings, not very surprising. But we also see that medical meetings or education meetings have almost had between a quarter and a third of the meetings that would go and be held virtually. So that's not too bad of a trend. And from what I personally experienced, I would definitely say the more international a meeting was, the more likely it was actually to go virtual. I think the more regional meetings, the national meetings are not part of this statistic, but the more regional meetings would probably still be more likely to be postponed than the international ones. And here is what was the impact on the attendance. We actually saw this is actually very positive. We saw that attendance was actually quite was going up. So we saw that virtual allowed more people to attend the meetings. So from an average attendance of 908 packs per meeting for the original meetings, we saw 1,356 people attend for these virtual meetings. So that's an increase of 50%. And that's really wind that we have in our sails that we can take with us in the future. And a great argument for running meetings in the future hybrid as well, to really expand that base of people that would attend our meeting and be much, much more inclusive. The downside is that we did see registration fees decrease. I even know some conferences that decided to run their virtual meeting for free. They managed to do it through sponsorship and so on, especially in the first year. The second year, most of them then charged, even conferences that were free the first year, but still everybody charged quite a bit less. So that's also something that we need to keep in mind as we go back to live meetings. Are we increasing the fees again, and are we actually charging differently for the live component than for the virtual component? According to this, most people do that, so that's definitely something we need to keep in mind as we move forward. Trend number 5, and this is where we really get to the heart of it, meetings need to have a purpose. And when we look at that, we know what we do. We know we organize conferences and we know how we do them. We know that we do them either live or virtual or hybrid. The big question that we really need to ask ourselves is why we do them. Why are we actually managing conferences? And this is really based on Simon Sinek's Start With Why. So if we focus on that why, we really need to ask ourselves, why do we do what we do? Why do our clients attend a conference and get on a plane and give their time? So as an association, why do we organize our conferences? What's the goal? And if your answer is only to make money to organize, to run the association, that's not good enough. There needs to be a bigger goal than that. It's the dissemination of knowledge. It's getting people together. It's a networking effect. And then the question is really, is that overlapping with what our clients, our attendees want? Because if in this situation, we want people to get on a plane, fly half around the world, deal with all of the difficulties that they might have to deal with in the near future, still from testing, pre-departure testing, on-arrival testing, maybe even quarantine or the chance of quarantine, always the health risk that you might get infected or not, the increased flight costs maybe, or any other costs that are associated, all of this, why would somebody do that? And the answer cannot be to just do the same you could do virtually. There needs to be a bigger reason and there needs to be more behind it. Content, of course, is always important, but content also needs to be classified. Content with context is something we can really give on live better than online. Online, we can give you every presentation like we do here, nice slides, a speaker that goes through them, easy to be done. The context of discussing things, the context of being able to meet somebody in the hallway and discuss further, the opportunity that you have, if I give this conversation, this session live, and you don't agree with me, or you wholeheartedly agree with me, or whatever it is, you come to me in the break and we discuss it. That's the context that is needed. And that's something that can only be done live. I mean, you can have Q&A sessions online, but let's be honest, it is never quite the same as when you talk to a person face to face. Content discussed. So I really encourage everybody, once we go back to live events, to rethink how many frontal presentations like this do we want to do, and how many more discussion forums do we want to do, workshop, hands-on training, really things where people get more engaged, something that really makes being there live worthwhile. And of course, content that is unique and really tied in. So really trying to tell a story with the whole content that we put together and making sure we present something that's a little bit different, that's not been done over and over again. Because just traveling to attend conferences because you always done so, I think that will be a hard argument for the next few years. So what are some practical steps for hybrid events moving forward? We need to incorporate virtual to promote what we can do live. So this is a good way of showcasing people, hey, before you travel to my conference, let me show you what quality you can expect. So let's show them some content that we've recorded, content that we can do in a virtual setting. You can see this is the kind of level that you can expect for this conference. We do that for one of our conferences that we run with ICS, where before we open registration, we actually give a free keynote that everybody can watch for free. They sign up just for this free keynote. When they attend it, everybody that attends it gets a slight discount if they register right after listening to a keynote. But a keynote is really a bit of a see before you buy idea to give people a chance to get a bit of an experience of what our conferences are all about. We can use virtual for all the dry stuff to really, in the last few years, for many of the conferences, we saw more and more content being pushed in to be held at conferences. So there's lots of breakout sessions, lots of frontal presentations. That is something that could be done virtually as well, and where we could do some of those in a virtual format and get them out of the way. So when we actually have the meetings, we can actually discuss and have more meaningful fora amongst our delegates. It also allows us to lower the entry barriers by making it available online, a bit cheaper. People that can't travel necessarily can see it first online and so on. And we can involve people to get ownership from people, involve them in having a role in the meeting as well, be it online or live, and really making sure that we don't just go back and create meetings that are top down, but that are integrated and where everybody plays a part of it. And one of the examples I always like here is South by Southwest. For their conference, they crowdsourced their program through social media. So a good idea to really engage people, not just a scientific committee, but the audience at large, to maybe even help crowdsource some of the content of our meetings. Experience is key. That's trend number 6. And that really goes down to the same argument that had, why would somebody get on a plane to come all the way to our conference? And that is to have unique experiences that need to be beyond the usual destination experience. They need to be specific, they need to be curated, and they need to be exclusive. And I don't just mean touristic. I mean really experiences that matter for the field that we're in. So I always give this example. If I hold a meeting about earthquake engineering in Sendai, Japan, like there is one coming up, or I think it just happened, having field trips of being able to go out and see kind of the engineering structuring that has been done there, or how the tsunami and the earthquake affected the engineering of the city after. That's a unique experience that you can't have anywhere else in the world, and that people would actually travel for. And question yourself when you host a conference, what are the centers of excellence that you have in your city, in your country, that you could showcase to your delegates, and where delegates could get a little bit of a taste of what you have to offer in your destination in that specific field. It's really about the touch and try more than just the see and hear. So try to give people a real experience where they can see what you have to offer and what the destination has to offer, and also kind of create some of those zones like you see in this picture, where people can really have an interactive experience. And there is lots of technology that we have right now to immerse people, from VR, augmented reality, to touch screens and so on, to really engage people a lot more beyond the usual and incorporate that into our meetings in the future. Trend number 7 is purposeful networking, and please put the emphasis on purpose. Networking is more than just putting people together in a room, giving them a glass of wine, and then say, now mingle and get to know each other. It really comes down to, am I meeting the people that I need to meet? Am I meeting people that are of purpose to me? So purposeful networking is targeted at the end. So I want to make sure I meet the people that are relevant for what I am doing. So that could be research collaborations, that could be people that work on similar things, that are working in similar fields that I am, so that they are actually a value to me as well. So we also need to make an effort to connect these like-minded people. And that can be happening through technology that we use. It can also happen through zones in the convention center, in the networking areas, where we create them and say, okay, this is a hub for people that work mostly globally, or this is a hub for people that work in this specific area of research, or this is a hub for people that are dealing with advocates or whatever it might be. Make sure that people can meet like-minded people easily. And if we do this well, it also allows us the opportunity to create this feeling of belonging and be really part of something and creating something together. That's really important for most of our delegates, and that creates loyalty on the long run. If people feel they belong to a tribe, they belong to our group of people, our association, that's really important. And that means we have to create these places where people feel they can contribute in a way. They can contribute to what we are doing, what we're trying to achieve as a conference, what we're trying to achieve as an association. So all these ideas really need to be implemented into a successful networking effort, networking conference. Trend number 8, flexibility. And I don't think that's a huge surprise, but flexibility is going to be key. All those reasons that I mentioned before is we don't know where things are going to go. We don't know how likely things are going to shut down again, how likely it is if we host a conference that it's actually going to happen, all of those things. So we need flexibilities in contracts. We need flexibilities in governments working with us, in destinations working with us, to make sure that if things go out of hand again and the unforeseen happens again, that our associations are not stuck with a big bill that might run them out of business in the long run, or we as PCOs are not stuck with a big bill. We need to really make sure we adjust how we do things and need to change a little bit. Also in the short run, there will be flexibility in how do we use space, and especially if we need to do ART testings, if we need to do social distancing or not. We need to work with venues, convention bureaus, and convention bureaus to really make it happen now. And nothing is as it used to be. And that's the other thing. Very often this history that we have about a conference, that we know this is how it always been, this is the amount of people that came, this is how many hotel nights they stay. All of this data that's before 2020 is not really that relevant anymore. In some ways it might still be, but we cannot say until the first events have happened that our customers' behavior is still the same. Will they stay longer? Will they stay shorter? Will they book with us? Will they not book with us? Will we have more people? Will we have less people? All of these things we can give good estimates, but truth be told is we won't know until it actually happens. So we need the flexibilities of every player in the industry to understand we're starting afresh, and we need to just get to know our clients once again and need to get to know their needs once again before we can go and lock people into difficult contracts in the future. Trend number 9, additional benefits to travel. And this is maybe a bit of a controversial one, especially when I discussed it with people before. What I've seen in the last few years is a bit of the picture on the left. People that will come to conferences will come like this. They have one little suitcase, even if it's on the other side of the world. They stay 3 nights, maybe 4 nights if you're lucky. If it's a short distance destination, maybe just 1 or 2 nights to attend a conference. The average conference attendance for most medical meetings was just about 2.5 days, maybe even a little bit less than that. So we saw more people attend more conferences, but shorter. With everything that has happened, with the difficulties that we see with traveling, and people are about to start traveling again, the question is if this is a trend that will continue, or if we see people going back to having longer trips and making more out of them. So that could be, if I already go to a conference, I might do some other business in that destination. What other business can I do? Can you link me into that? Is there another conference or another reason for me to come to that destination, so I can make a better argument for making that trip. Or maybe even the good old, am I doing a vacation before or after? So there's really lots of different things. Let's just not go into the vacation, because that's not something we can always influence. But what we can influence is give people additional benefits and making sure that the offer is attractive. As a conference, we can say there can be workshops, there can be courses that we can do before or after. As a destination, we can say, let's link people into other options in our destination where they can have sales meetings and have experience meetings, and can see the cancer centers, they can have some exchanges or whatsoever. So it's really important that we consider that people might be looking at more than just 2 days in your destination, which might be good for destinations in the long run as well. And trend number 10 is, where's our economic recovery going and how does it impact business travel in general? If we look at this forecast, and this is a forecast by the Monetary Fund's, the World Economic Outlook, that was done in April 2021, we saw that GDP of course was negative in 2020 for the world, the US, the Euro area, Japan, emerging and developing Asia, not in China, because they were really able to manage it well and have a huge domestic market that they were able to really kind of benefit from. We saw it contracting quite a bit in India and the ASEAN 5. The forecast for 21 and 22 was quite positive, and we saw it especially positive in China and India in the region, and also emerging and developing Asia. So that's really nice, but that was April 2021. I think now we are looking at September. The Delta variant hit since then, so there might be a bit of lower numbers here, but it's quite interesting that the outlook is good, and hopefully that will really have a good impact on business travel as a whole as well, and what we can benefit from that. The 2020 GDP growth and contraction also saw that the countries that managed COVID better in 2020 really saw their economies do much better. So Vietnam, Taiwan, and China, who managed their COVID outbreaks quite well, did very well. This year we see especially Vietnam having issues. Taiwan also saw some issues. China had some new outbreaks. I guess now the question is really what will instill this confidence in consumers and in the overall economy again. It's probably the vaccine rollout, and we will have to see how that really goes and how we see the growth of GDP. But we really see the market did not like uncertainty, and they wanted to make sure that they were willing to invest and willing to do things were really going well in areas that actually kept things well under control. China is a bit of a different story though, and I'm using here a bit of an old statistics just to make a point. The question about China is really how much is China focused on domestic development versus international development? And we did see, even before COVID, a trend that goes way more towards China being much more focused on domestic development. So China's exposure to the rest of the world has been consistently going down, while the rest of the world's exposure to China has been going up. So the world wants to get into China. China doesn't necessarily need that exposure to the world. And since COVID, I think that trend has gotten even more amplified. And we see China really doing well on the domestic front, but really having no intention in opening up to the international market quite yet, while the rest of the world, I think, is quite eager to get back to normal. And then let's look at business travel as a general and the impact of business travel on the country's GDP. And here I have quite an interesting research in a study that was done by the Harvard Kennedy School's Growth Lab. And they looked actually, what's the impact of business travel on the country's total GDP, not just the immediate impact from the business travel. So what was found that there is causation between a country's incoming business travel and its economic growth. And the more business travel as a country received, the better its industrial ventures fared as a whole. Again, way beyond the business travel itself as a whole. And of course, as a result of that, the higher their GDP climbed in the end. Why does business travel have such an impact? Well, it comes to the movement of know-how. And know-how is a quantity that is transferred from brain to brain through lived experiences. It's not something that can be shared online or in newspaper articles or something like that. It's really something that you learn by working alongside somebody else. And this is why business travel is so fundamental. And this transfer of knowledge, this movement of know-how is fundamental to our success in the future and to making this a clear priority for starting our economies again. We already see in some fields, in science and medicine, way less research being published right now than before the pandemic. And it does have to do with this lack of collaboration, in-person collaboration that we see, especially on international level, especially on levels of international conferences. So it is very, very important that business travel starts again for more than just hotels and airlines, but for an industry, for the economy as a whole. So moving know-how quickly involves moving brains and therefore moving people. And this is not the best graphic. It shows really how different countries impact each other in terms of business travel. But to give you a bit better graphic, here's the outgoing know-how index. So that basically says if a country stops traveling completely, if their people stop traveling for business completely, what is the impact on the impact on the global economy? How much would the global economy shrink if this country would not send people abroad anymore? And if you look at this, Germany is the leader on that. If Germany would stop sending people abroad for business travel, the world economy would shrink 4.82%. Canada, 1.23%. The United States, 1.07%. These numbers might seem small, but if you look at it, it's just one country's impact on the whole world's economy. And that's quite impressive actually here that we see. So these countries have quite an impact on the world. And so we see here Canada as an example. Again, the country that was most impacted by Canada not traveling abroad anymore would be the United States, followed by Jamaica and Mexico, not surprising, neighboring countries. Germany, again, neighboring countries like Austria or Switzerland, but also African countries like South Africa, Nigeria. So very important that they keep traveling, or Malaysia, a little bit closer to home. If Malaysia stopped traveling completely, the most impacted Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines, Thailand, so more of the countries in the region. On the incoming know-how index, you see basically the countries that most benefit from it are the smaller countries here in green: Austria, Ireland, Switzerland, that really benefit the most from it. If we look at some of the Asian countries here, Taiwan has a lot to catch up on. Malaysia, a lot to catch up on, minus 9.6%, minus 9.8%, minus 10.3% for Korea, for how much incoming know-how they actually could still have, like what's the deficit between outgoing and incoming know-how here. So really still a lot to do in Asia. We see most of Asia rather in the red field. So really, as we come out of this recovery, we need to really think about how can we make up that deficit and get more know-how into our countries. And conferences are a fantastic way of doing that. I hope these 10 trends have really given you a bit of an idea of where things are going, what we see, and maybe especially with the last input on business travel, I want to give you a bit of ammunition as well, as we need to talk to governments, we need to talk to officials, we need to talk to partners about how to start up again and how to get the industry going again. Why it is so important that conferences start up again, that we keep doing what we're doing, and that we're coming back stronger than before. But back to trends, if you want to make sure you always stay on top of what's going on, it's important that you, of course, listen to people, listen to all these sessions at these ITCMA and IMEX and IBTM and ICA, PCMA, IAPCO, all those different conferences that are so important, but also to keep your own eyes and ears open, because you can spot trends yourself. One of them is really follow the news globally. A lot of trends can really be seen by just checking what's going on in the world and seeing how you can tie that back to our industry. Exchange with your peers. Talking with peers, with other industry professionals, especially in other countries, always gives you a good overview of what's going on, what can be implemented into your daily work as well, or your work environment. Watch people's behavior. Conference industry, we are the people's business. What people do in other areas, they will at some point start doing at conferences. And that comes from the usage of apps, how they interact with each other and so on. So make sure that we incorporate that into conferences as well. We also see what's happening in other industries. We're not always the first one. Actually, conference industries, one of the late adopters for most things. So really important that we see what's going on in other industries and see what might be coming down the pipe for us. And just adjust your thinking to what could be done then rather than how things were done. And that's never been more true than right now. I do not like people saying, I can't wait for things to go back to normal. That's not going to be the case. Nothing's going to be ever going back to how it was before. That never happened in the history even before, and it will not happen now. Time is like a river, and time is like water that flows, and you will never step into the same part of the river again. And we have to accept that, and we have to be excited about that, and really just take it, see what's going on, and go with the flow, run with it, and think about all the things that could be done better and how we could move our industry forward together. This is a great opportunity. This is maybe a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reinvent the way we do things. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention. I wish you a great time here at ITCMA Asia, and great learning, great connections, hopefully. And I hope to see many of you, and maybe all of you, in one of the next industry gatherings. I'll definitely be there as soon as the borders are open. Thank you very much.